Welcome to the Creepin' It Real show, your one-stop shop for weird news, spooky, otherworldly, and paranormal shenanigans. We'll take a dive into what's going on in creepy pop culture. You can follow us on Twitter at creepin_it and like us on Facebook at The Creepin' It Real Show. Do you have a paranormal story you'd like to share with us? You can email us at creepinitrealshow@gmail.com. Welcome, Creepin' It Real Creepers. This is Christy, your host with the most for the day. And joining me is Moni from California. How are you this morning, Moni?
Exhausted, but working on that second cup of coffee. It is 7:30 here, and I'm on a 6-day work week right now. So we had a very successful library event yesterday that I was in charge of, though, and it was quite a large-scale event, and so I'm just a little bit like, I really have to go to work on Sunday too, guys.
No kidding.
But, yeah, but boss life is what it is. No complaints. Anyways.
Hey, how are you, party animal Yardley? How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. It's been a good weekend so far. I can't complain.
Good. I'm glad you're living the life for all three of us, because
Yes.
I was in bed by like 9 p.m. last night and trying to still adjust to getting up at 5:30 in the morning during the weekdays, and has turned me into my body going, oh, you think you're going to sleep in on the weekends? Ha, very funny.
Yeah.
So I have no excuse except for the fact that my brain just wants to get up now at like the latest 7:30. I'm like, ooh, I'm sleeping in at 7:30. Now I know what all those people have been talking about all those years. So boo for me. But we'll just jump on into the show, since I'm going to do my best to lead us this morning. So a couple of weeks ago, a couple of shows ago, we talked about mad poopers and the kind of the mystery behind it as to why. And it seems to be like something that people aren't just doing because they gotta go. It seems to be like a sticking it to the man, I guess. I don't freaking know what they're thinking, but in, I believe it's New Jersey, a school was having a problem with somebody pooping on the football field like every day. The maintenance people would go out there and see a giant human turd on the field. Well, they installed surveillance videos and caught the culprit, and who turned out to be the school superintendent. Now, this is so odd to me, because wouldn't he know that they put freaking cameras out there as a superintendent? And B, why? Yardley, can you explain to me what is in this man's head? Because as a woman, I know there are women ones, but it seems to be the majority as men seem to be crapping on, I don't know, their employers or their neighbors or something. They get pissed off and they crap.
That's probably along the lines of what you say. I guess the stick it to the man thing could, but he's the superintendent, so I guess to a certain extent that he is the man, so maybe he's sticking it to himself. I don't know why. I don't know why he would do it, but at the same time, the article isn't... it doesn't get super specific about anything, because I was trying to see
what specifics do you need?
Well, I mean, I would have thought maybe he would have had a hat on or tried to mask himself up, and they found out some way. It's just hard. Just like Chrissy was saying, it's hard for me to believe that they don't know that there are cameras. So I just don't. I think it's more to when they caught him than him just being out there with nothing to cover up. You know what I mean? Like I don't. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know what would make a person do it to begin with, but it's pretty sad, but it's also funny, because no matter what you do for the rest of your life in New Jersey, you're going to be the dude who got caught shitting, at the school.
Sure. So. He needs to move away, change his name.
Yeah, I'm not that he has a face you just cannot forget. He looks creepy as hell.
He looks like a serial killer.
He does. And the thing that's cracked me up about this is he's charged with defecating in public, but he's also charged with lewdness and, get this, littering. Sorry, but I'm like, littering? Like, okay, I mean, sure, he is littering in a sense, but I guess
I think somebody. So I think somebody might have followed him and saw him. You know what I mean? Like,
probably.
somebody had to find him and just put him on blast. But
this has to be a power thing. It has to be. He was getting off somehow on like doing this, right? And that was fun for whatever reason in the first place. And then, you know, he, as the superintendent, having people complain about the terrible problem of someone pooping on their beloved field, like, you know, that's got to be. And he was going, he, yes, that is terrible. We must catch the culprit. He. Like, this was like juvenile prank gone awry, I swear.
Well, I mean, he gave up a 150,000 year job. I can't imagine needing that kind of, whatever that itch, that scratch that,
Yeah.
that he was, whatever. I am like still trying to wake up this morning. Whatever, you know what I'm saying.
Scratch itch.
Thank
Whatever
you.
it was.
Thank
Yes.
you. To give up that kind of money is just so bizarre. But they go on to say that it's pooping in public is becoming a trend. And they go to list several cases, apparently, that are happening. A lot of them in the north. I don't know if it's a northern thing. There is one in Arkansas, which it's Arkansas. So sorry to anybody in Arkansas who's listening. But if you live there, you understand. I lived next to Arkansas for a spell. So anyway, I think it's kind of bizarre that this is kind of like popping up in the news over and over again. This guy in Ohio pooped on 20 cars over a period of 2 years, known as the bowel movement bandit. The guy had a PhD in educational wait, is that him? Yeah. I mean,
they call it a bandit. Like, he's not stealing the poop. He's depositing the poop. Like, the bandit thing kind of cracks me up.
It's just bizarre. I thought it was such an unusual news story a couple of weekends ago, but now it's turning out to not be so unusual. So I'm sure we will have many more of these stories to come. You guys just wait on the edge of your seats to hear about the poopers.
They are just copying Southern California because we have a booming homeless population, which is sad. I'm not making fun of that part, but the homeless people, for lack of other places to go, have been pooping on like the library property, for instance, for years. And I just want to say, everyone's copying our trend. So that's
so ahead of the trend. Yes,
we started it. Okay, you're welcome for the humorous news.
Great. Well, hey, if I was homeless, I would want to live in California. If I couldn't get to Hawaii, the next place would be California. So I can understand why everybody, if you're homeless, you'd want to head over to California. And I promise, if I'm ever homeless, I will never poop in the library. I promise.
You can poop in the proper receptacle, just not on the grounds, please.
You guys should get paid a lot more for your job. The more stories I hear about what you do and the people you have to deal with, I'm like, dang, you guys don't get paid enough. Anyway, all right, moving on. So I chose us to watch a movie mainly because I wanted to talk more about what the movie was about than really the movie per se. I thought I had never seen this movie, and then halfway through the movie, when I started watching it the other day, I was like, if they create a house and a gym, I've seen this before. And then sure enough, the house and the gym showed up, and I was like, yeah, I'd seen it. It'd just been like 15 years since I'd seen it. So it was kind of new for me. But I had read an article like last November. Somebody did a story about the real lady that the entity was based on, the movie that we watched, Doris Bither. And I was kind of intrigued by it because all these years, she's since passed, but her kids to this day swear that this really happened. Of course, they said the movie over, and it was more kind of a hyperbole on what really happened. They made it for for movie watchers, and some of the stuff wasn't like what she had said, but that's just how it goes to make the movie interesting. But reading the art, reading the interviews that the son gives and the neighbors and friends, they to this day say this really happened to this woman. And I just thought it'd be an interesting topic to discuss because I don't necessarily think it was a haunting per se. And we can get more into that later. But anyway, so The Entity is a movie from 1981. It was surprisingly well rated on Rotten Tomatoes. I was kind of surprised because it is 80s, kind of cheesy 80s, glorious, horrible leisure suits and cars and just, the typical 80s cheesy crap. But it did get 86% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it did. But you're not going to tell the listeners about the Dorothy Bither case that
Yeah. We're going to get to it after we talk about the movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have a whole thing we're going to read. All of us are going to take turns. It's going to be fun. Yes. I know. Right. You better get sober, Yardley. Get your reading brain on. Just kidding. Anyway, I'm going to give you I'm only giving Yardley shit cuz I got a text from him at like 3:30 this morning and I was like, "Damn, he's living the life for all of us cuz I can no longer do that." It's like jealousy. Anyway, so let's see what IMDb gave it. I don't think IMDb was that. Well, they gave it a 6.6. That's, to me, anything over a 5 on IMDb is pretty good. So Barbara Hershey is the star, and I freaking love her. I don't know if y'all really know anybody else familiar with Barbara Hershey?
I feel like I've seen her before, but I didn't look up what else she's been in.
She was in Beaches, which is like one of my favorite movies ever with Bette Midler. And
am I the only girl in the world that hasn't seen Beaches?
Oh my God, girl. Watch Beaches with like a gallon of tissue. Not kidding. You will need it. You just shove your face in the tissue box and ugly cry because you will. She was in a lot of early.
She's in Insidious movies. Yeah. I think that's where I saw her most recently. Anyway.
Yeah.
She was in Black Swan. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. She's fantastic. I love her, and she seems to just really age well. Ron Silver plays the doctor, and he he was in another one that was in a lot of like 70s and 80s movies. Of course, this was in the 80s, so these guys haven't really done much since then. But anyway, he plays the skeptic doctor, and it starts actually, and I didn't remember the beginning of the movie, and I was kind of taken aback because it really just jumps right in. It doesn't build up any story. It's like, boom, she's a single mom, and it shows her coming home. She's walking around the house upset. There's lights on and things are, a mess, and checks on her youngest kids, and boom, all of a sudden she's slapped, bloody, assaulted, it's pretty much implied that she's raped by an unseen force, and she freaks out. Her kids are crying and are hysterical because she's screaming, and the son is running around the house looking for an intruder, because she said somebody broke in the house. She doesn't really understand that it was not an actual person. Turns on all the lamps. Things are shaking. The air's cold. She's freaking out. She runs out of the house with the kids. And that's it. I mean, literally the first 10 minutes of the movie, there it is. Like, they don't waste any time. So, Moni, what were your thoughts at the beginning?
So, full disclosure, I didn't get all the way through the movie because it is super, super rapey.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like something about me being an empath or what the thing is, but like, as I was watching it, I was reading up on the case that it's based off of. And I tell you what, whether, and we'll get into that, I know, but whether what happened in the movie / real life was mental illness, whether it actually happened the way that she thought it did, it doesn't matter. Like, that is, I can't imagine the trauma. And then, at the point that she gets attacked in front of her kids for like the second or third time in the film, I was just like, yeah, I'm done. Because it's just, that super upset me. Like, and obviously whether that is how it happened, something like that happened, and these kids witnessed it too, and whatever went on in that house was super traumatic. And so, yeah, I read up a lot on it. I've done a lot of research on it. I have some theories on what I think really happened, but just I didn't get, that's FYI, I didn't get all the way through the film. So anyway, but that's what I thought was, and the very 80s, like the music, and I see you have it in the notes here too, but my husband and I were both like, man, this is violent enough without bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
Bam.
I mean, the music, you're like, ah.
And I feel like the camera had to be like, in there, and the camera was going back and forth too, and it just felt like being punched. I don't know. It was pretty visceral, which I guess was what they were trying to get to make it scary. And, I didn't even find it so much scary as I just found it upsetting to a point where I was like, I don't think I can go further with this.
Yeah.
Well, it was that, along with what I was mentioning last week, with it being 2 hours, without even seeing the movie, I knew that was too long.
Yeah.
for the movie.
For what they were doing.
Yeah, and it took me a couple of days to kind of get through it. Like, I watched the first hour one night, and then the second hour, another night. But kind of the same. I definitely agree with the music thing, that thing. That was it actually became funny the longer that you watch the movie, and I'm pretty sure we'll get into some of the prosthetics and the special effects, so to speak, for this movie. They're dated, but some of the creepiest stuff came from some of the decisions that they made, using certain prosthetics later on in the film. But I have to say the same thing. They jump into it fast, and there wasn't any build up for it, but at least for what it was worth, that's what kind of made you want to keep watching it, even though it felt drawn out.
Yeah. It's funny because we just got a new sound system put in our living room, and I ended up airplaying from my computer onto the TV. And after I watched the movie, my husband came out and he's like, well, like the new sound system's working really well, because it was like burk, 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 and I'm like, turning it up to hear the words, and then turning it down when that part happens. I agree. It's weird because being a child of the 70s and 80s, I just don't remember. And my parents had they didn't really parent me about movies. I watched The Exorcist when I was like 5 years old. So I watched pretty much anything I wanted. I remember watching Faces of Death with my dad. I mean, talk about a fucked up video,
Yeah.
And watching this, and I think, like, as I was watching it, I'm thinking, I didn't realize how violent the 80s still were. Like, this was, I don't remember watching this movie. I only remember watching parts of it even now after I've watched it. I knew I've watched it, but I just don't remember. And maybe it's because, I don't know, I think as a parent, it just affects me a lot more now than it would as a young adult when I watched it the first time. Didn't really affect me like that much back then. But yeah, it was very in your face, graphic from the start, and it was hard to watch. I picked this movie not knowing the full extent. I mean, yeah, it says, oh, she's sexually assaulted, and I'm like, okay, that, I'm thinking it happens like one time in the movie, and the rest of it is being haunted. Not literally the entire movie is her being sexually assaulted by a ghost. And it was just like, whoa, I mean, I don't know of another movie that's horror based on something like that. And it's even more bizarre that it's actually based on a real story. So anyway, I just want to quickly move through the review because I honestly want to talk more about the case than the movie itself. So she heads over to a friend's house, and it just cracks me up because it seems like every 80s movie, like, couples or parents are just assholes. Like, they really play into that. Like, she goes to her friend's house, and her friend's husband is a huge dick,
Yeah.
And she doesn't feel comfortable staying there because he's being an asshole about the whole thing. And, she's shows up with 3 kids, so he's not exactly thrilled. And so they go to the beach, and then since they've got nowhere else to go, they got to go home. And here's what cracks me up, and I don't know why this makes me laugh, is her son's name is Bill. And it just, Like, I know so many adults named Bill, but I can never picture a kid named Bill. So I was just
Don't you call
laughing.
him like William or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, so she was calling him Bill. She wasn't calling him Billy. She was Bill. And I'm like, Bill. It's just such a old man name. So anyway, that was one little funny anecdote that I enjoyed out of the movie. Like a kid named Bill. It's like a kid named Doris or Gladys or something. You just don't see kids named that. Anyway, so she goes to the emergency room, and in comes the cynical, skeptical Dr. Snyderman. She's bruised, and he's, doesn't believe that it's from a ghost. So, of course, who would, really? Especially back then. But so she goes home, takes a bath in Mr. Bubble. That again made me happy, because when I was a kid, I freaking lived in Mr. Bubble bath. That was like the greatest thing ever back then. And it was like a big box of detergent. It was like powder in a box that turned into bubble bath. It's not like, the crap that you get now. But anyway, so then of course she is assaulted again, and then here I say, what the fuck with the banging sound music, because Jesus, every single time it's like bad enough it's happening, and then it's like a freaking hammer. So she goes back to the doctor, and he's like, gives her a ride home and says, you know what I suggest you do? Or he like prescribed is her to take a bath and take some tranquilizers. It's like, hey, thanks, dude. And he comes rolling in. Was that a Chevelle? Like, just not a doctor's car at all. I was thinking it was going to be some nice BMW or something, and it was this little piece of shit. It looked like those, what were they called?
It looked like because I used to have Chevettes, but I know that when I first saw his car, I was thinking it was along the lines of that as well. I was like, wow, like what kind of doctor are you?
Exactly.
Because doctors in the 80s were flossing like hell.
Exactly. They were rolling it. Anyway.
Well, not that much debt as now.
I guess not.
Yeah.
But so she, trying to, live a normal life. It's giving the kids Sundays, and boom, gets raped again in front of her kids. Yeah. Her son's fighting off the invisible thing and gets thrown and ends up breaking his arm. Again, I wrote, imagine dealing with things like that as a kid. Very disturbing. I can't imagine as a child. It's scary enough to think that violence happens, but in your face and with an invisible intruder would be even more horrifying. So back to the, ER, because he's got a broken arm, and the doctors all come together and start talking about it. And one doctor pipes up and says, it's because she's masturbating. That's why this is happening to her.
That is some aggressive
Of course. Exactly. She's masturbating. Therefore, all the evil in her mind is from the masturbating. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, because women, anything sexual that involves women, and the guy's got to be backing off. Like, she got to be doing something wrong there.
Yeah, it's masturbating, because masturbating's wrong if you're a woman. Anyway, Yardley's like, I'm staying silent about that. Anyway.
Clearly, I think it's easy to surmise that, of course, she's got PTSD about something. Mm-hmm. All this other stuff is just super extra. So I'm not surprised that they would say, hey, look, she's got a little PTSD going on and she's masturbating. I could see how they could, I could at least see how that is at least one diagnosis, but it seemed to be like the only one, which I thought was pretty sad.
Yeah. And, the thing is the doctor's like, asked to drive her home. He walks to the house one time for like 30 seconds, and he's like, there's nothing here. You're mentally ill. It's like, I get you're a doctor, and that's what you already think, but walking through her house for 30 seconds and then is like, that's your, now I've proven it. It's like, give me a break. Anyway. So in comes her, I guess, on and off boyfriend. And it's funny because I've only seen him in like as he's older, the guy that plays her boyfriend, on and off boyfriend in this show, who's a total asshole, of course, in the show. And it's funny because he's one of those actors, I looked him up on IMDb, his name's Alex Rocco, and I recognized him immediately, except I knew him as looking old, not young. And he's one of those guys that has worked as an actor successfully like his whole life, but only in small roles. So we never, he's one of those guys that you just never know his name, but you're like, I know that guy when you see him.
Yeah, he's been in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, he was in, I think I was watching Cannonball Run not too long ago. It was one of those movies, and I believe he was in one of those, one or two or something. But yeah, he's a great guy, and he kind of reminds you of like Red Fox, just like you said. Like you always think of them as have been old for like since they were born. They look like they were old.
Exactly.
But he's a good guy, and he can do humor pretty good as well.
Yeah. I mean, and he's still working. I mean, he has creds all the way, I believe, to this year. Beginning of this year. He's also in Sopranos. Anyway, he is a typical Italian-looking guy with the last name Rocco. That's not surprising. And so he plays her boyfriend and, does the asshole thing good. And it seems like most of the roles he plays the asshole. So he just must be, have that down pat. So she comes home and goes to sleep after she hooks up with, or she can't hook up with him. She tries, but it's like, yeah, I can't. She doesn't say why, but just can't do it, which I can understand. It's going to be a little hard to be intimate. And then falls asleep and is attacked by the spirit again. And this time she orgasms in her sleep and then wakes up and realizes it's not, she wasn't dreaming, and totally loses her shit, which I would not blame her. I can't imagine what that would feel like. So then she goes back to the doctor, and he implies that she's mentally projecting, because she says that there's several people attacking her that are spirits, one big guy and two little ones that hold her down while the big guy is attacking her. And he points out that she has an older son who's big and then two little kids, and she's somehow projecting that into this disturbing thing that's going on in her head. So she runs out and leaves, gets upset, and of course is like, screw you, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, and goes to her neighbor. No, she goes back to her friend. And they leave her there. She's there by herself, and they leave her there to go somewhere. And they're in like one of these high-rise ritzy condos. And the thing comes to the condo and basically just fucks the condo up. Like, it looks like it implodes. Like, all the windows are shattering into it. There's stuff everywhere. And then her friend, her friend's husband says, oh, she did this. And the friend's like, are you kidding? That's not possible. So her friend finally believes her. And so, she heads over to the library and looking for something to find answers, and overhears a couple of guys talking about stuff that, paranormal stuff, looking to research. And she overhears them and says, hey, I have all that. And because they're talking about bad smells, shaking, cold, and this apparently really does happen. This really did happen to this lady. And so they head over. I'm trying to just kind of skip over all this. I don't want to go through the whole movie. Sorry, guys. But it's like, don't want to skip too much, but don't want to get too detailed either. So they go over to her house. They don't believe her. They think she's, crazy, because I'm sure they get a lot of crazies in that line of work. And they come in, and of course they witness more activity than they've ever seen. And then the whole team comes in and they start investigating. And then comes her ex, and he's like, what the fuck's going on? Because he walks in her house and she's got all these people running around everywhere. And they finally head out, and he gives her a negligee to put on, and he's like, here I am giving you a negligee. Now we're going to have sex and all your problems will disappear.
Yeah.
And
my magic dick.
Yeah, me and my magic dick and my maleness is all going to make things better, baby.
Gonna fix it.
So he hands her negligee and is like, go put this on. And she's gone for a while, so he goes in the bedroom and he sees her laying on the bed, being assaulted basically by something invisible. You can see like the imprints on her boobs and everything happening, and she's, screaming, "Help me." And he tries to get her off the bed and fight whatever this is, and he gets thrown down. And then, they go to the hospital, and of course the doc is there. He's just, does this guy ever have a life? He's always at the hospital. And the paranormal crew go, and her boyfriend goes, and he just can't handle it, and he takes off. So much for the strong man who is going to fix everything.
I mean, if your dick can't fix it, then you're out of ideas.
I guess
what
so.
Are you supposed to do? What do you expect of him?
If a negligee in my dick isn't going to fix it, nothing will. I'm out of here.
This is an unfixable problem.
Exactly. So they visit her, the paranormal team, and I guess there's a doctor that goes around the hospital that, the hospital thinks is a quack, and she heads up this paranormal team, and she has an idea. So basically they recreate her house in a gym, but it has no ceilings. And then they have liquid nitrogen canisters at the top, above the ceilings. They put her in the house and make her pretend like she's living her life in her house, and they wait for this entity to show up so that they can trap it with the liquid nitrogen.
Go about your business, citizen. Never mind the fact that you're going to get raped in front of all of us.
Exactly. Well, I guess they're hoping they can catch him before that happens. I don't know. And the thing is it's not. I mean, they gave her the panic room thing, the door, little corner to hide in, but it's, invisible, and she's never been able to escape it before, but somehow this time she's going to, apparently. So gets attacked, of course, and but the door, it doesn't work. It's like something happens. I can't remember now. I think the trap door doesn't work, or no, it explodes the door. The nitrogen, it gets triggered onto the spirit, but it also shatters the door behind the glass that she was in. And so the skeptic doctor comes in, saves her from this exploding nitrogen and glass, but it does trap the thing in the nitrogen, and it's pissed. And it starts the whole place starts shaking. He's pissed, the thing's pissed. So she makes the deal with it and says, "Here's the deal. I'm going to go home, and we'll stop doing all the research and shit. But you can never truly have me," whatever that means. I don't really know what that means. So she comes home, and you hear the entity say, "Welcome home, cunt."
Yeah.
I'm like, really? Wow.
Extra.
It was extra, and she's just like, "Hey." And she kind of gives this cryptic grin, and her kids come home, and she's like, "I'm the parent with the greatest," and the movie ends. So,
and they lived happily ever after.
I guess so.
A cunt and her children. Very lovely story.
Yeah, I thought that ending was fucked up. I would have done that a little differently. Yes, the real true story is the thing apparently never really left her. It wasn't as bad that it was at that time, but that wasn't exactly how I would have wrapped it up. But it was the 80s. There was a lot of drugs, so who knows what they were on when they created this movie. But anyway, so that was the end of the movie. And I wouldn't say it was a good movie. I think a lot of people found it disturbing and therefore rated it high because of that, if that makes any sense. It's not necessarily there was some good parts of it I thought were creepy that weren't even really part of the rape scenes. It was just, there was some kind of good parts that were creepy that weren't attached to that.
Really? Because all of the stuff that I thought was creepy was just the rape scenes. Probably the last one, the one that actually, I have to admit, I just busted out laughing. It was the one where she was on the couch and then the thing pulls her legs apart and I guess is raping her in front of the kids. And then the son, when he's standing there and the lightning comes out of him.
Yeah.
Because this whole movie was basically all of these actors having to do physical stuff. So with her, you could tell, like, you remember early in the movie, I guess it was the first scene where she was supposed to be getting smothered by the thing with the
Yeah.
pillow,
Yeah.
and you could tell that it was her pulling the pillow towards her
Yeah.
face. And then, so you got a lot of that, which just used to make me it just made me die. Thing when her son was yelling, and then he had to act like he was frozen, and then the lightning came out, I was on the floor at that point. And I was already so close to the end that I was like, damn, I can't say fuck it now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
Gotta
yeah,
see this thing through.
but those were the parts that kind of creeped me out, because it was just thinking about the two girls that were over there holding each other, and
yeah.
like she really went in on it, like raping her that last time, and I was like, damn, this is a little bit too much, but it was funny.
It was like a paranormal porn almost. It was kind
Yeah.
of, ugh. I mean, I don't know how to even, it wasn't that graphic, but they showed her complete nude body, at one point, and so it was a little, it was a lot. I could just say that. I'd give it a 4 in a rating.
Well, I think it was the prosthetics. I guess we could talk about it, how they had the prosthetic made of her body and showed it like squeezing.
Yeah.
Squeezing all over her. And that was, it was pretty bad, but thinking about it in the 80s, it definitely would have been effective, and maybe that added to the creepiness, just that the prosthetics just made it look even more wonky. So
there was a time when people thought Godzilla was scary. We look at Godzilla back in the day now and we're like, oh my god, could that be any faker? But back then it was like, that's so, well, I'm sure in the 80s that was, whoa, now we're like,
Yeah, you know what? That's the case sometimes, because sometimes you can watch old movies and then they're actually creepier than some of the stuff that you have now. You know what I mean? But yeah, but in that case, I thought that it was interesting that they chose to do that, with the prosthetics. But I guess the angles that they were trying to show it, that's the only thing that they could do. But yeah, it was definitely something that kind of made me, it creeped me out. But at the same time, the acting on top of that, like it delivered a laugh when I don't think that the people who made the movie wanted me to laugh.
I don't think any part in this movie they were wanting you to laugh. So yeah, if you're laughing, that's probably not what they wanted. But I didn't think. I guess not a lot of it I thought was. I think the part I thought was funny was when they were saying that she was masturbating and that's why she's having this problem. And it just is so. As a woman, you're just like, give me a fucking break, And I kind of laughed about that, but I just kind of rolled my eyes a lot, and I rolled my eyes big time at the ending. So yeah, you didn't miss much, Moni.
Well, what are either of your, what kind of opinion do you have on, if you were somebody and you had to go someone saying that this was happening to you? Would you be surprised that people wouldn't really be buying it? Or is this something that you would have even gone to someone to talk about?
I think at a certain point, this is something you'd have to confide in someone about. And I think trying to get out of the house thinking that it's something with the house is a logical step. So especially if you're like a single mom with a bunch of kids, like maybe you don't have money to go to a hotel necessarily, or maybe you want to stay with friends because you'll feel safer. But I think you have to talk to somebody at some point just to, from a physical safety perspective, even if you're going to stay in the house, you'd be like, okay, if something happens to me, this is what is going on. And I think if someone came to me with this, I'm not sure I would believe like, okay, it's definitely a ghost and it's 3 ghosts and this is what's happening. But I definitely would look at the person who I assume would be a friend or family member that's confiding in me with this and say, something is going on with this person that I care about that warrants attention. And even if that person's trying to get attention and it's just some kind of psychological breakdown, I would try to help my friend or, this person for sure.
I guess I wouldn't necessarily believe but I would. Apparently, within the real true story of this happening, this thing was very active. I would have gone to the house. I would have been like, if this is really happening, I would have gone and spent some time there and seen it for myself, really. I mean, I'm not going to believe it, but I'm going to at least give her the benefit of the doubt and try to help her. And if I go and there's just not any, it's not happening, then I'm going to go, maybe you should talk to a psychologist or psychiatrist or something. And if the thing follows her around, then, you know, put her in a room and sit with her, you know, as a doctor. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is really, but I just feel like, back then, I mean, of course, I think we have a little bit more fascination with it now. But back then, anytime you said anything was haunted, you're viewed as crazy back then.
Yeah.
It's never, it was just not something as talked about or believed as much back then as we can do it now. They got, you know, an entire channel dedicated to haunted stuff. So, little different times back then, so I can see, of course, that they're not going to believe her. I wouldn't have believed her, but I would have gone through the motions for her to prove me wrong. You know,
I don't know that I would have invited or gone over to the house. I think I have such a, like, and maybe this is bad, but I have such like a me and my family first that I would definitely, like, if my friend came to me and said this was happening, I would definitely take them in and take care of them and try to help them with whatever might be going on. But as far as like getting more involved with what is or isn't actually happening, like just on the off chance that this is happening, I don't want to go to that house and like poke the bear and have it get pissed at me and then like wreak havoc on my family. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I could totally see from like a curiosity perspective, but I also kind of feel like even if this really is what's happening, if it's really ghosts, I don't know that they would necessarily perform on command if I showed up, but they could just be like, oh, this chick, you know, wants some too. Why don't we start messing with her? Like, I just, no, thank you. Keep that to yourself.
Right. Well, I mean, so the real Doris, the real story of Doris Bither is a little different, but it was something definitely happened to her. I mean, there are witness after witness after witness, not just her kids, who saw and experienced things when they were around her. And that's, to me, the key, is that you have to be around her. It doesn't have to be at the house. And I personally, I mean, we're going to read a little bit more about her now, but I personally believe that it was a poltergeist. I think it was from her. I think it was an energy manifested from her because she led a really fucked up life. She had a lot of struggles, starting from very young. And I think when you are that toxic and you have lead such a toxic life, not necessarily all her doing, just even and around, it can manifest. It can become an actual thing. It can become its own toxic, negative, like, energy, and manifest in ways of abuse. And I don't think, like, you have, you know, a lot of teenagers when they go through puberty, they have, you know, what's talked about as a poltergeist, like activity happening around them because hormones and crazy energies that the kids are going through kind of manifests its own, I don't even know what to call it, but that's really my theory on what happened to her. Is it was coming from her. I think it really happened, but I think it was coming from something manifested, a poltergeist manifested from her own person. Anyway, well, I don't know what y'all think.
Yeah, actually, I want to share what I think, but shall we read so that we kind of, sorry to push forward,
go ahead.
but I just, to fill listeners in on the so-called true story. So Martin Scorsese called this one of the scariest horror films of all time, and the entity is more than just a movie. The events rolling out on screen, bringing chills down your spine, were based on the true story of Doris Bither. In 1974, which is when Doris first spoke of her problem with paranormal investigators, Dr. Barry Taff and his associate, Carrie Gaynor, Doris was a young, wow, that's poorly worded. Anyway, Doris was a young single mother in her 30s. A string of abusive relationships, which we mentioned, took a toll on her, driving her to suffer emotionally and seek the solace of alcohol. So obviously her testimony is with a grain of salt just right there. This put a strain on her relationship with her 4 children. And she had 1 girl and 3 boys, and they were all from different fathers. Doris had overheard the men discuss paranormal occurrences at a bookstore, so she invited them to come by her place as she believed it was haunted. It wasn't until the investigators got there that she told them she had been sexually assaulted by a trio of violent entities. The smallest 2 would hold her down, while the tallest one would rape her. The troubled woman's eldest child tried intervening once while his mother was tossed around the room, but was thrown across the room and broke his arm. However, their doubts disappeared once they saw the bruises on her inner thighs and all over her body. Doris's neighbors also testified to seeing apparitions moving around the house. The children, too, had seen the beings. In fact, they appeared so frequently that one of the children dubbed the most prominent one as Mr. Who's It.
Okay, well, all right, deciding to see the story through, the paranormal investigators called in their team and set up their equipment to detect manifestations. According to their report, Doris was instructed to summon the beings, so she began swearing and yelling at them. Suddenly, lights manifested around the room. As she continued hurling abuses, a green mist swirled from a corner and started growing to form the muscular upper torso of a man. Despite their equipment, investigators managed to only capture a free-floating arc on top of Doris as she shat as she shat in her bed.
The mad pooper.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess that would make
we know where it started. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so interviewing the whole family, the investigator found out that the entities lashed out at a certain songs, such as Black Sabbath songs. So moreover, it seemed that the entities were growing stronger due to the emotional issues surrounding each member of the family. However, the paranormal activities were strongest whenever Doris herself was present in the home.
And so I will put a picture with the post, but they post the picture of what they were talking about with Doris is sitting on a bed. This picture has been authenticated. They did review the negative, and it has not been tampered with. And they, at first you would say, well, it's just a reflection on the wall, but it's actually not, because when you see the corner of the room, if it was on the wall, it would bend there, and it does not. It is a full arc, and it's over her head. So they're saying this was floating directly over her, and the picture authenticates that, is what they're saying. So, and this was in the 80s, so we didn't have Photoshop back then. So despite leaving that house, Doris claimed that the entities followed her every time she and her family members moved. She even claimed that she became pregnant due to the spectral rapes, but medical tests showed that she was suffering from an ectopic pregnancy. After the late 80s, Doris hasn't been heard of. Her son, however, did come forth for an interview in 2009, which is when the world found out she had passed away from pulmonary arrest in 1995. So now, really quick, I'm just going to read some of Doris's son's interview, just a quick quote of what he said. He says, "The whole rape thing was real. My room was right next door to my mother's. I would hear the attacks happening, things being thrown, her screaming. She would come out of the bedroom and have all these bruises on her legs, her inner thighs, just like in the movie. There were times where we would see it happen in front of us. It was like if a man was standing in front of my mother and would start to beat her. Imagine a woman being beaten. You could see her being picked up and thrown around. Sounds, slaps, but there was no one there to actually do it. We all felt it too, pulling, biting, and scratching. We were all attacked." So that is what her son says. This was an interview, I believe, in 2009 that they'd spoken to him, and come to find out that, yeah, she had passed in 1995, which I don't think she would have been that old. So that's a shame. But so Moni, what is your theory on what happened to Doris?
I do think it's pretty much the same thing as you were saying. I looked into this a lot, and there's all kinds of different theories. There's all kinds of, the story changes. Some people say she wasn't pregnant at all. Others say that it was an ectopic pregnancy, which, that's a pregnancy still. I mean, I'm not saying a ghost got her pregnant. I'm just saying she was, impregnated somewhere along the line. The photo, which we'll post and is in our show notes here as well, is one of the most, that and the investigation. And the investigations went on a lot longer than the movie, portrays. She allowed investigations in her home by different people for years. And the photo is one of the most significant and not thoroughly debunked, pieces of paranormal evidence in, the history of paranormal research. And the photo is basically portrays her in the middle of a bed with a bunch of people taking other pictures and videoing and recording and all this stuff. And there's just like a spectral light, almost kind of like a bright rainbow or something going over her head. And that being said, though, for me personally, I don't believe that there were ghosts per se. I think, like Christy said, it was a poltergeist-like activity manifesting somehow with the deep emotional turmoil that this woman experienced her entire life. I'd like to point out, we only use 10% of our brains that we know of. Like, what if you tapped into some other part just by deeply hating yourself? And so you are, a deep depression that causes you like an almost suicidal level of just like, I hate myself, I don't deserve anything, like, and so you are constantly punishing. What if that became so strong that it manifested as something that physically punishes you regularly? And then add that to 4 children who are now witnessing this and experiencing extreme emotional trauma due to it. Now it's just making everything that much worse. I mean, when the investigators came into her house, the house had been condemned twice already. So did the so-called spirits or poltergeists make the house that dirty, or were things in that bad of shape before this all started happening? Like
that one, now his son will contest and say that's bullshit, but I don't really know the truth to that. But he says in that interview, I didn't post it, but they asked him about it, and he said that was complete bullshit and that it was never condemned. But again, he was young. He was like 5 years old when all this was going on. So I don't know if he knows
that is public record. Like, I didn't look it up, but you could find out if that place was condemned, because they said it was condemned twice. Mm-hmm. The foundation was cracking, the house, no matter what, the house was a huge mess when they got there. And, houses are going to be a mess with 4 kids and someone who has to probably be at work also, so she's not around a lot. But how much of that might have been whatever poltergeist activity that was or wasn't happening. But there was so many witnesses that something was going on with this woman. And I don't necessarily trust the main doctor, because if you read his website, it's a little bit like, here's why I'm telling the truth. And it's not even like well written, I'm like, what kind of doctor are you again? Like, I'm not really sure about him not trying to gain some notoriety. However, it was one of those things too, where she moved away, they moved to Texas, and this still, not to the same extent, but it still continued happening. And she, stopped allowing them to investigate, but still things persisted. And then she died at a fairly young age, and I just really think she had so much, whatever it was. Like, when I talked to you guys, 2 weeks ago about our seance that we did, and how I mentioned that my friend Katie, I think, was the one that was causing things to happen, through her energy of wanting to believe and being in the right mindset for that. And, she heard the podcast and actually agreed that it very well might have been her, and how when I touched her skin, she felt electrified. I've witnessed people do things with the strength of their mind that I feel like someone who's had enough trauma and a strong enough mind could do this to themselves.
Yeah. I agree. Yardley, what do you think?
Well, how much research did either of you do as far as, things that happened prior to, all of these events happening to Doris? Like, what were her other relationships like? Because I'm pretty sure that a lot of the stuff that she went to prior to this happening had a part, you know what I mean, in addition to when she was making these claims, of the things that were happening with the spirits or the sexual assaults or whatever. I'm just more curious at the lack of information about the things that led up, to these events. So I'm pretty sure her past and the different people that she was involved in. I know, obviously, a lot of her relationships were, just came and went. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the pile on of all of those things happening, and, maybe she was assaulted, in real life, maybe some of those kids were the result of assault. You know what I mean?
I think that's highly probable. I mean, that's kind of what, when you hear, the one thing I've learned after doing the research of this case is, as toxic as she lived her life and the problems that she had, her friends and her family were incredibly protective of her. You're not going to get, nobody was bashing her. They would say, yes, she had a troubled life. It started when she was young. And they weren't going into details as much as people would ask. They were protective of her. And so that's why we don't get a lot of details. No. So if she is confiding in them, they did not spill, and they wouldn't spill. And a lot of people would ask, these people were paying, they would have paid these people to tell them her past if they knew it. And they weren't speaking. So as troubled as she was, she had a good network of people around her, that's for sure. So we just don't know a lot. But it was alluded several times, and she said several times that her past, starting from a very young age, was very troubled. Yes. So to me, that means and I've lived this before, but it seems like some kind of molestation, starting from a young age. And the statistics are that, unfortunately, if it's happened to you once, it's going to happen to you. You're more likely to have it happen to you again. Mm-hmm. So this was probably something that started young. And then once something like that's happened, it's almost like you attract these types of peoples in your life. I mean, you lead, they just know. It's like a magnet. They know exactly. Well,
and you have that level of self-hatred that I talk about, where you start to think you deserve this, Yeah.
So that's kind of, I'm the same way, Yardley. I was really curious. I'm like, what happened to this woman? Because even when it says these entities don't appear until she's screaming and hurling curses at them, right there tells you she's manifesting this. It has become its own entity, but it's based off of her and only appears when she goads it. And so that tells you right there that definitely, to me, in my mind, this was something that had come from internally from her. But I would be curious to know what happened to her as well. But I bet you $400 that it was from probably molestation from a child going on to, 4 different fathers for 4 different kids. I'm not saying, it happens, and some women just don't want to be in a relationship, but I don't get that that's what happened here. I have a feeling, and it didn't seem like the fathers were in these kids' lives.
No. A lot of famous hauntings that surround women, or what people have said at the time, or maybe demonic possessions or just extreme mental illness, whatever, like the Bell Witch comes to mind. There are older cases than this that's centered around generally young women with kind of murky past, usually involving molestation, some kind of rape in their past, that end up like an entity where it's violent towards the woman. People see the woman getting tossed around, multiple eyewitness cases, and the women move, locations thinking it's a haunted house situation, and whatever it is follows them. And I really do think that these women are making this happen to themselves. Not that they want it to, but on some level also, I think there's a deep need for attention and love, and a feeling like people will want to protect you. Mm-hmm. And so if you manifest something like this upon yourself, even if you're not doing it intentionally, because obviously who could do this intentionally, but it draws a lot of people to you, and then you can at least be like, people care about me now. It's really fucked up, but I think that's what happened here.
Yardley? Yardley?
Hello?
Are you there?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Can y'all hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. Yes.
Because y'all blacked out a little bit. I'm sorry. You might have to fix that.
That's okay.
But I didn't catch a lot of what Moni said. It was going in and out.
It's all right.
Just moany blather, blah, 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 blah.
Just talking about women and how when, this dates back for a long time. Actually, back in the early, 16 to 1800s, the word witch didn't mean what witch we think today. It actually meant another it was like an invisible piece of you. So back then people thought that you could manifest another version of yourself as a spirit and attack other people. So that's how the whole Salem witch trials happened, is they thought that these women weren't just worshiping the devil, they were actually manifesting an entity like this woman was doing, and instead of attacking them, it would attack other people. That's what they thought back then a witch was. Now we've taken it and we've created a whole other meaning behind the word witch, but back then that's what witch meant. And I'm assuming this is kind of like that. And instead of her having it attack others, it was attacking herself. She had really good control of this one. But anyway, so Yardley, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, as far as, you're talking about how you can manifest these things, and people always put blame on things that they can't understand. And I think a lot of us probably believe that a lot of those women that were burned to death during that were probably totally innocent.
Oh,
you know
absolutely. I'd say 99.999% of them were.
People who got vendettas or just any type of thing. So they totally got a bum rap. But what I'm wondering, in the instance of what was going on with Doris, I know both of you probably did a lot more research into this, but when it comes to pictures, are there any pictures of the bruises that she allegedly said that she got from this thing? Because I didn't necessarily see anything, about that. Did they take any pictures of that?
They took pictures, but they didn't post them. I didn't see, like they would say, I saw pictures. The doctors saw pictures of it, or actually took pictures. But nobody has posted it anywhere. I mean, I've seen people say, I saw it and there were pictures, but nobody's posted them anywhere. I mean, as far as I found, I didn't see any pictures of bruises or anything that they've posted.
Well,
Moni,
the pretty
did you?
much. Oh,
no, I didn't, but I do know that bruising, I was thinking she could do that herself.
Right.
But the direction that the handprints would have been, now I'm not saying a real life man didn't do that to her, but if her kids were seeing this and then it was coming up bruises right after, the direction of the bruises would be wrong if you tried to do that to yourself.
Right.
Do y'all think that is shocking that none of these kids, and I know when you're young, because when you're young, even when you're an adult, if something traumatic happens or something crazy happens, you know how the story kind of changes. Like it's never exactly the way that you remember it. But I'm kind of curious that, all these years have gone by and none of those kids have written anything, what I'm saying, about these events. Because it seems like, it would be great and it would probably interest me a lot more. Like if every last one of those kids wrote what they saw from their perspectives and then you kind of go through and read it, I think that would be interesting. But the one thing about this is I'm just totally shocked that nobody has really gone in. None of the siblings have gone in with their own accounts of this thing happening. And as far as Doris is concerned, I definitely, I'm going to stick to, it was probably a lot of the things that happened to her in her past. And I think that she genuinely might have had a breakdown. I just don't really know how to necessarily insert the paranormal aspect in this when I know that sometimes real life can affect your mental being a lot more than something you can't explain.
Yeah. I mean, my personal opinion is something happened. There was paranormal just because of all the witnesses that were there. You're right. The interview from the Sun was huge back then because he was the first person or of the family to talk about it in public. Nobody talked about it. It was I think they just had enough. I mean, they grew up in the spotlight, in the 80s, this was a huge story. This was on the news. This was something that was talked about, of course, in a ridiculed way. and they had to deal with this stuff in and out their whole young life. So I think now they just want to have a normal life, and so they're very much don't want to talk about it, don't want to harp on it, even if it could make them a few bucks. I think they're just done with it. But I personally believe that it was a haunting in the aspect that she had actually was the cause of it. And I don't believe that this being is anywhere after she died. I think it disappeared. I think it's gone. I don't think these two little guys and one man are moving on to somebody else. I think they literally died with her. So
yeah,
anybody has to worry about the big man and the two little people attacking them, because unless you manifest it yourself. That's my personal opinion on this one. I believe in hauntings. I grew up in a haunted house. Was nothing to do with me and everything to do with the house's past. I saw it with my own eyes, and when you grow up with that and you see it happening, it changes your perspective on stuff like this. Opens up a lot of doors in what's possible, because you literally in middle school and high school see things before your very eyes happening. So stuff like this is possible, but nothing. This one isn't that type of haunting. I mean, I think she was literally haunted,
Yeah.
But that's my personal opinion on it. And Moni, I guess you agree with me.
Yes.
And there is absolutely no doubt she was mentally unstable and a mess as well. Which is what's caused the whole thing. So with that, we will thankfully close the door on this one. Holy crap. When I opened up, I had, when I read the story, the article last year, I just happened to come upon it from the interview back in 2009 from The Sun. It wasn't this detailed, and had no idea what can of worms I was opening. And after watching the movie, of course, like you, Moni, I started looking even more into the story, and it was like, holy shit, what a fucking thing. And so anyway, with that, we will end this. Number 31 is in the books, yo.
Yeah.
We would love if you guys would reach out to us on Twitter. Leave us a comment if you're listening to the show. Say what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. Talk about any of your personal experiences, maybe something crazy you've had happen to you. Maybe you can come on the show and talk about it if you're so inclined, because we're really interested in hearing more on a more personal level, some stories. And you can find us on Twitter at creepin_it, or just search for the Creepin' It Real Show. Same as Instagram and Facebook. Moni, where can we find you?
I am Rebel Moni on Twitter, which I've been more active on, and Moni Bear on Instagram. And also, I wanted to ask you guys, as a teaser for next week, are we about to hit the 10,000 downloads, Christy?
We are. Let me see. I believe after this post, we will officially probably be up to the 10,000. So if we would like to do a 10,000 celebration next week, we can.
Next week is quote unquote my week, but you mentioned last week that we were going to steal it and just do a 10,000 celebration of some sort. So I would like to compile some listener stories, if we have any, some stories of hauntings that people have told us, or alien abduction, or basically any spooky story or weird story that anyone wants to tell us or has told any of us personally in the past. Yardley, even as a skeptic, if you've had any friends tell you a crazy story, I want to add it.
Solid.
Hey, Yardley, by the way, I just saw, and I can't remember where it was, but I thought of you. They're making another Old Hag Syndrome movie. And I thought of you. I was like, oh.
What was the name of it? Because I saw something that was coming up, and I was going to mention it on the show, but then it just, we move around to so much different stuff. It kind of slipped my mind. What was it?
I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to look. I think it's literally called Old Hag. I don't know. I'll have to look and see. But I saw somebody talking about it online, and I'm like, ooh, I wonder if Yardley knows about this. But I don't know. I'll have to do a little more research. I'll have an answer for you.
Yeah.
I'll tag you on Twitter when I find it.
All right, no doubt.
Okay, so next week we'll do a 10,000 download celebration. I think that's pretty darn good. 31 episodes, 10,000 downloads. Thank you guys so much for supporting us. And we're going to do a little extravaganza and a giveaway. Ooh. You're going to get some swag, y'all. And I already picked it out, and it has something to do with shocking alcohol. So if you need to update your alcohol cabinet, not the actual alcohol, but your accessories, then tune in and try to win our giveaways for our 10,000th download episode. And so after that episode, Moni, you will be able to then, it'll be your turn again. We're just going to do, next week's going to be all three of us. We can all throw some shit in the pot if we want and talk about it, whatever we want. It's 10,000. Let's fuck it. Just go crazy.
All right.
So with that, Yardley, you didn't do your where to find you, did I?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at militant_marker.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. And next week, we're going to be a lot more celebratory than being raped by ghosts. So with that, I hope everybody has I hope everybody has a wonderful week, and we will see you on the flip side.
Bye.
Some rainy day I'll go away with all your troubles on my arms to make no more hurt, to make no more harm.